In the year 2009, two geeky guys launched the latest show in an early wave of podcasting. The payload, perched on the rising crest of geek culture going mainstream, was a two-man opinion show. Aboard this compact series, Jake Nelson and Skip Harvey were to experience cosmic forces beyond all comprehension. In short order, their lives and lack of understanding about the future popularity of the genre got in the way. Dispatch Ajax was blown out of its planned trajectory into an orbit 1,000 times less memorable. An orbit which was to return the show full circle, not in 5 months, but in 12 years.
Gentlemen, let's broaden our minds.
Are they in the proper approach pattern for today?
Negative.
Hold the weapon! Now! Charge the lightning field.
Jake, you were alive in the 90s, right?
Should we introduce our podcast?
I'm getting there.
Oh, sorry. 90s. Yes. I'm
Yes.
gonna put me down for yes.
Okay, so you were born in the 80s, so you presumably were alive during the decade of the 90s because you're here today, so...
I can neither confirm nor deny that.
Have you ever heard the story of the origin of that phrase?
No.
It's fascinating. So, since you were alive in the 90s, do you remember a little dalliance on Fox called The X-Files?
Why, sir, yes, I do.
No, sir, I don't like it. Though you do like it. We both
I
like
very
it.
much like it, yes.
It's
yes.
great. Man, what a great show. And we'll get into how much embedded I was into the X-Files culture in a bit. This is the 30th anniversary of the X-Files. And this is the first episode of Season 2 of Dispatch Ajax.
Is it?
Welcome to the show.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Well, I know I was trying to spring
How
it
about
on
that?
you.
How about that, everybody?
He
Huh?
didn't know.
I didn't know.
No, because I didn't tell you. That's why. That's why you didn't know. That's how I'm trying to explain this gap in episodes.
Oh, okay. Mind the gap, everybody.
Mind the gap. I mean the retail store.
I like to mind Banana Republics instead.
I'm proud to be an American.
Could you
Or
please
at least-
mind the American Eagles?
I remember that time we fought a bunch of people over a guano island. A bunch of international law is sacrosanct because the United States wanted to claim an island that had a bunch of fucking guano on it because it had phosphorus, which was important for weapons manufacturing and shit like that. Cool.
America.
Yes, this is episode 1 of season 2 of Dispatch Ajax. I'm Skip.
I am Jake.
Very declarative. I like that.
I am Jake.
Are you going Groot or are you going,
I
don't
am
know, like
Jake?
MCP or like...
I'm going OCP. That's what I'm doing.
Oh, nice. Very good. That's true. So for Jake and I don't want to speak
What?
for...
What?
Yeah. Hey, but can you hear... I'm trying to... It's... Ow. Can you... Is it... Well, I can't...
Bad joke.
A peanut...
Skip, are you there? Are you there?
Jake and I grew up in the 90s, 80s and 90s. We are children.
80s, 90s, and today.
Jake and I have all the classic hits.
We got the Eagles. We got Ario Speedwagon.
Oh, man. Early Metallica, man. Phew.
We've got a little load and reload in there, too, for all you late fans.
Jake and I like Prince and David Bowie, so...
Yes. The more sexual Tyrannosaurus, but with purple clothes on, the better.
That's funny because we are going to reference Jesse Ventura in a bit here. Goddamn sexual Tyrannosaurus.
Are we now? That's
Yes.
fascinating.
So this is the 30th anniversary of The X-Files, a show that was on Fox. It was obviously American, though it was shot mostly in Vancouver. Sci-fi, horror, sometimes comedy?
Yeah, drama.
Yeah.
Sometimes adventure.
Thriller. It was one of those shows that did a really great job, the whole gamut of possible genres. It originally aired from September 1993 to May 2002. That's when we dropped off for sure. You and I were in college. And I was shocked our sophomore year when I found out X-Files was still on the air.
I don't remember if you were there, but I remember gathering around the TV for the final episode.
No, I wasn't there, no.
Because it was in...
No, I wasn't there. I should have been. It was 2000. It was May 2002.
Was that not the last episode? I remember gathering for one of... I don't know. We were in...
Are you thinking about Lost again?
No. This was... We were in Dobson, and...
No, you were not in Dobson when X-Files ended.
Well, that's
were
why...
we?
If you let me finish my statement... We were watching an episode, because I remember... We were watching some, quote, momentous episode of X-Files, and I just assumed it was the last one, because that would have been 2001? But it couldn't have been the last one, so I don't know.
No. It was probably the last episode with Gillian Anderson.
They did a season without Gillian Anderson?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because it was just... What is the actress's name? It was her and Robert Patrick.
I thought she came back during that season.
She did at the end, right at the end, for the last 3 episodes. Well, an episode and then a 2-hour whatever finale.
So I think maybe we watched Duchovny coming back. Maybe that was it.
That might have been it. Yeah, because they made a whole big deal about it.
Because he was abducted by aliens or something.
Well, no, what you're thinking of is they flipped
he was taken away for a while.
Yes, they flipped the script on when Dana was abducted early in the show, and they made it about him, and he was about to die, and then they did the whole Native American sweat lodge thing, and he met his father, I guess, and everybody in the astral plane.
Because this is when he was having a contract dispute. He may or may not come back to the show at all.
Right. So the X-Files... Well, it is, in fact, the 30th anniversary, and I cannot believe it's been 30 years, of the beloved show, The X-Files. Were you not a child of the 80s and 90s and missed the surprise hit show when it was on TV? Did season 11 leave a bad taste in your mouth because it sucked? Do you need a refresher on the adventures of Scully and Mulder, or Mulder and Scully, as I like to call them?
You got Scully and my Mulder.
I got Mulder and my Scully. Together they killed an alien.
And birthed an alien baby?
Oh, no, not really. Well, Dana? No, it turns out it wasn't. Oh, you don't want to know how that ends up.
No, why not?
They retcon everything in the last season.
Like the last season?
Last season, they retconned almost everything that happened with Dana's pregnancy.
Did she not have a baby that she then raised? And
so she did raise a child. Remember, because it was Mulder's kid.
Yeah.
William. It's not Mulder's kid.
So
it's the smoking man's kid.
What? Did she not give birth to this child?
Oh, she did. Well, wait, did she? That one? Did you give birth to William? Or did he get extracted?
I don't remember.
Because remember they wrote it into it that she got pregnant in season 2. They wrote that into the script, which was great. Actually, they did a really good job with that. And they gave her just these big chunky trench coats so that you wouldn't know that she was pregnant.
Wait, Jackson Van de Kamp, born William Scully III, son of Dana Scully. Mm-hmm. Originally believed to be conceived following an initially failed in vitro fertilization with Fox Mulder as the sperm donor.
Mm-hmm.
Right. However, the cigarette smoking man claims that when he took Scully on a road trip, he impregnated her using alien DNA to create the first superhuman child, who was William.
And he's got superpowers.
Right. Yeah. He's right.
It's
he's right out
awful.
of Heroes.
Roundabout, yeah, because this is a terrible 90s X-Men plot.
Oh, in 2002, Scully gave William up for adoption following multiple attempts to kidnap or kill him. Mm-hmm. He was adopted by the Van de Kamps and renamed Jackson.
Yeah, he became a fish stick magnet.
Oh, it's the American dream, really.
It is the American dream. I call it a fish shtick. Oh, look at the time.
Anyway...
One of the main influences for the X-Files was a little show called Kolchak the Night Stalker, starring Darren McGavin. Though one season was a huge influence.
It was only one season?
That's why it's crazy.
That's super
right.
crazy.
There are a lot of shows. Like Star Trek was only 3, and they only had the 3rd because of a letter writing campaign by the fans. Like Star Trek was almost just 2 seasons. Yeah, it's one of those weird cultural things. It influenced a lot of stuff. The premise of Kolchak and Night Stalker was a gumshoe reporter for the Chicago what-have-yous.
It's my favorite sports team.
Right, yeah. I can't remember if it was like a made-up name or an actual paper or whatever. But he was a newspaper reporter.
It was Las Vegas.
The Chicago Las Vegas?
No,
Yeah.
he was a Las Vegas newspaper reporter.
What?
I'm reading it off of its website.
Oh, man. Maybe I'm thinking of Bob Newhart again.
Maybe you're thinking of the reboot?
Oh, my God. I'm never thinking of the reboot. Stuart Townsend? What a terrible fucking show. Also, I'm pretty sure done by a producer of The X-Files.
Wasn't Stuart Townsend supposed to be Wolverine? Or was he supposed to be Aragorn?
No, he was... No, the Wolverine lineup was Joaquin Phoenix, Doug Ray Scott, and then Hugh Jackman. And now everybody remembers Doug Ray Scott. Such a great career.
It's the best career.
Everyone remembers him from Mission Impossible 2.
It's the best one. It has the most
second-
doves.
It does have the most doves, I'll give you that. It has less lens flares than 3.
It might have the most doves in any film of all time, honestly.
Oh, I don't know. Some of his Hong Kong stuff, though. I don't know. There's a lot of doves.
I just recently watched all of the Mission Impossible films except for the latest one.
Okay.
And watching 2, I was like, wow, this is a lot of doves.
The dove quotient in the later movies is lacking completely. We got to get your dove levels up.
Steve, he's dying. We need doves in his stat.
Oh, man, yeah.
It's an excessive amount of doves in
Did
Mission
he put
Impossible 2.
doves in Blackjack, even? I mean, I'm pretty
Probably.
sure
Let's
these...
see. I wonder.
I can't remember. We haven't watched it in a long time, but...
Has most doves. I can't find which movie has the most doves. Someone needs to make a
Shocker.
website based off of that.
There's a shocker. You couldn't find a database of the most doves in a movie.
I want someone to count every dove and then give us a dove score.
Preferably not internet troll. No, am I wrong about that, or is that...
Sorry, I was in the dove matrix
World?
down. Yeah, I got jacked into dove.com, so
like Johnny Mnemonic?
I need more doves.
Is that a talking dove?
He's got the DTs. That's the dove tremors.
That means you're an alcoholic if you see doves. Man, John Woo's in trouble. At that time in the 90s, the FBI was in the spotlight because they were dealing with a lot of militias, cults. You know, they fucked up Ruby Ridge. They fucked up the Branch Davidians in Waco. It had done a lot of stuff recently. When was the last time the FBI was featured in a thing? Before that, you had Dragnet or you had the Untouchables, but those weren't the FBI. Hoover was an awful human being who kept the FBI out of the limelight on purpose. He wanted them to be a secret police, essentially.
Yeah, but they had that show in the 60s.
Yeah, that was the 60s.
Oh, it was 65 to 1974.
Okay. What was it called? Just the FBI?
FBI, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But
who remembers that?
Well, I know that because I was reading the book Killers of the Flower
Whatever,
Moon,
yeah.
and that
Which
they
seems
the
interesting.
FBI TV show was to promote the FBI as this all-American gumshoe super cop kind of thing. And so they'd use actual case files from the FBI to make this TV show. Mm-hmm. But they'd always come out on top and...
Yeah, it's called Copaganda.
Well,
yeah.
yeah.
We've been doing that forever. That was the era of Woodward and Bernstein, so gumshoe reporters were still the guys that broke the stories that brought the big guys down, doing the real work, taking down a corrupt president. The source for Woodward and Bernstein was a man named Deep Throat, which was based on the first pornography ever mainstreamed. Celebrities were going to see Deep Throat, starring Linda Lovelace. It was a huge hit. And so the inside man in the Watergate scandal went by the name Deep Throat secretly. That would show up later, very obviously, in the X-Files, because the man that would hand Fox Mulder inside information into the government conspiracies called himself Deep Throat, who's a great actor, by the way. There's a lot of Star Trek stuff.
Oh, the guy who played Deep Throat in the show?
Yeah. So let's run down the top 5 most crucial episodes that you need to understand the X-Files as a genre. So the X-Files worked because it appealed to people that grew up in an era with culty sci-fi, horror, fantasy, but also during Watergate and the whole era of disinformation and misinformation and distrust of the government, but also then a resurgence in the public eye of the FBI. So most of the premise of the show focuses on those basic ideas, which sounds insane, the scope of it. But actually totally works as a Monster of the Week type series.
Weren't there 2 different types of genres of episodes within X-Files?
Well, okay. So there's Monster of the Week, which is a classic TV trope. Then there's what Chris Carter calls mythology, which is the underlying spine of the premise, the whole alien thing with Fox and his sister and his dad and Deep Throat, that whole thing. And then there is the satirical parody stuff. I think those are the 3 main categories of X-Files episodes.
All right.
One of the reasons the show is brilliant is because they managed to do a very serious show about very serious things and then have comedy episodes that totally fucking work. I mean, yes, you're right. Broadly, the X-Files breaks down into 2 categories. I say 3, but yes, later. It's either standalone Monster of the Week stuff, which is Doctor Who, Star Trek, any sci-fi fantasy thing. Well, hell, Perry Mason.
Yeah,
or
any cop show.
Yeah, this thing happened this week, but we're never going to address it again, and we solved it. That's what we call, in the geek genre stuff, Monster of the Week. So you had Monster of the Week stuff, but then you had mythology. The latter are interconnected installments that make up the constant underlying narrative, but you need to understand both of these to appreciate the series. So to start off, let's begin at the begin. Watch the pilot. It's really important. It's crucial to understanding the premise of the show, though you'll pick up on it eventually, and maybe in the cultural zeitgeist. It's vitally important to watch the pilot. Okay, so these episodes are not in chronological order, but these are very important. So my number 5 in this list is season 2, episode 5, which this entire season was changed and rearranged to include Gillian Anderson's pregnancy. Basically, they just put her in bigger and bigger trench coats, and then eventually when she had to go on maternity leave, they created a narrative where she gets kidnapped and taken away, and we don't know if she's alive or dead. The episode's called Dwayne Barry. It's a classic example of the complicated relationship that develops between Mulder and Scully and how they come together under the alien conspiracy mythology that makes the show what it is. It's one of the first times that Scully is directly affected by Mulder's seemingly quixotic quest for the truth. The episode begins to lay the seeds for Sully Sullenberger's, Woody Derenberger.
It wasn't seagulls, it was little grays that hit the plane.
It was Indrid Cold. Got caught in the engine again. It lays the seeds for Scully's shift from the debunker of the X-Files, which was the premise that she was supposed to be the logical, rational one debunking the flight of fancy conspiracy theorist Fox Mulder. It shows the shift into the force of balance for Mulder's far-reaching enthusiasm. So she experiences things that only Mulder believes in, and so it starts to influence her decision-making and the course of the X-Files. This is where we really begin to see them not as opposing forces, but as partners working for the same goal, though they're taking completely different approaches to it. One is working to debunk, one is working to bunk.
Man, I'm just working a bunk right now.
So, the number 4 episode you should watch is season 1, episode 3, Squeeze. One of the few episodes to actually get a sequel. There are 2 Monster of the Week episodes that get sequels in the series. One of which is this, and the other one is The Pusher, the telepathic dude who can influence people's behaviors. So Squeeze follows Mulder's quest to hunt down a seemingly immortal, extremely flexible serial killer who eats the livers of his victims. Once again, I think a throwback to Silence of the Lambs. But it's funny, if you watch the episode, they do the whole Schindler's List thing, where when he finds a victim, it goes to black and white, and the victim he's picked out has one article of clothing that's in color, and he follows that around just like the girl in the red jacket. So Mulder attempts to track down the evil Eugene Toombs. This investigation goes back decades, hinting at the origin and definitely the history of the X-Files as institution within the FBI. The fact that these things have been happening for a long time is a key to unraveling the show's big mystery. I mean, they really give you this key to unlock a door that you don't know exists, and you will, of course, come back to Eugene Toombs later that season, at the end of season 1. So number 3 is season 3, episode 2, Paperclip, which of course is named after Project Paperclip, the
Never heard of it.
U.S. Nobody in ufology's ever heard of Project Paperclip, that's for sure. It was the Allied, but specifically American, attempt to sneak out Nazi physicists and literal rocket scientists from Peenemünde, where they were doing experiments to try and build a nuclear bomb and then make them U.S. citizens to build up the Manhattan Project. Now, the Soviets also got a few of them, but the U.S. got all the good ones. And that's why the Manhattan Project ultimately paid off for them. So in this episode, it is an installment of the alien mythology, the spine of the whole show, but when it was good, when it was compelling and interesting. It does what made the show great in its prime. It gives you answers to the crazy conspiracy storylines you've been given thus far, that simply reveal that there are more layers to the onion, but it also gives you a glimmer of hope that there's a genuine direction and plan for the show, unlike Lost, but that there's a long way to go before we know it all. It had so much promise, like Lost, but sucked so bad, like Lost, by the end, when you look at it retroactively. So, number 2. Season 3, Episode 4. Now, this is where we get into some really fun territory. This is where we get into the influence of a writer named Darren Morgan. His brother, Glenn Morgan, is one of the executive producers on the show. Darren Morgan originally appeared on the series as the guy in the makeup of the episode with the Fluke Man.
Which is a personal favorite of mine.
Great episode.
Yeah.
Absolutely great episode.
I love Fluke Man. Fluke Man creeped me out as a kid.
Hate porta potties now.
I'm
more
not
than
gonna sit on them.
normal. No. I figured Fluke Man was down there somewhere. Fuck it, Fluke Man down there somewhere.
Fucking Fluke Man.
Which was a great early Monster of the Week episode about the idea that fluke worms were able to regenerate whole body parts. They weren't complex, but eventually evolution would create a more complex version of it, and it became a bipedal man type.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't there something about nuclear
pollution
Russian
and stuff? Yeah.
Sub and
Yes.
gets out of
Yes.
there and morphs with the man and then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think you're right. I think you're right. I think it was a Russian nuclear sub that had sunk or something, and it had got into the groundwater or whatever, the radiation, and it had mutated the fluke worm into a man, which they kind of replicate in certain other episodes, like the one with the guy from RoboCop, the one who goes, "Who wants to live forever?" The bald dude. Mm-hmm. He's in an episode where he's basically the same thing, but he's a person, and you can cut off his head, but it'll grow back.
Oh, wow.
Because he plays a paramedic, and he gets into some accident or whatever, and he gets his head cut off, and then his body grows back, or vice versa. And then there's the episode of the guy who is sort of secretly a weird brain-eating monster, where he has a proboscis that shoots out and, like the alien inner mouth, and sucks out your brain, kind of like in Starship Troopers.
Oh, yeah.
And he works at a drive-thru. Yeah, and he was eating people who came late at night through the drive-thru. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Hungry.
And then because he kept having fantasies about grilling Brain up on the griddle.
That's nothing like Silence of the Lambs or Red Dragon. Doesn't he cut up Ray Liotta's brain and fry it?
That's Hannibal.
Is that Hannibal?
Which sucks. But yes, the book Hannibal fucking rules, because at the end they do that scene where he's cutting up sections of Ray Liotta's brain and grilling them on a griddle and then feeding it to him. They do that whole scene, but in the book, there's this big final confrontation face-to-face between Claire and Hannibal Lecter, and he goes on this tirade about how we're not too different, you and I. And there's this whole tense moment while he's doing this to poor Ray Liotta's character, and then she agrees, and she sits down and eats his brain with him. And the book ends. Mm-hmm. Because her obsession and his obsession were parallel, and they understand each other. It's great. In the movie, it's not that. It's way less complicated and way less nuanced. But we're still living in the house that Silence of the Lambs built. In fact, I'm pretty sure there are other episodes where they reference... No, in fact, I know for a fact there's the episode with Brad Dourif where he's like supposedly a serial killer, but he thinks he's psychic. And Fox and Dana go to him to try and figure out this woman had been kidnapped, but it was a copycat of his stuff, and he was able to predict where these people were going to be. And the prevailing logic was that he was in contact with the copycat and directing him what to do. But then it turned out he was actually psychic because he predicted the death of Dana's father, and did a whole channeling his ghost or whatever. And this is one of the greatest things that ever happened in the show for me personally. Scully's father calls her Starbuck, and that's how she knows that Brad Dourif is actually psychic or whatever. It's great, but regardless, they did the official "I'm going to the serial killer to find the other serial killer" trope from Silence of the Lambs, but they made it way cooler because it was Brad Dourif, Chucky himself.
A little bit of Exorcist 3 in there as well.
Oh, you're right. Yeah. Except no one died on set.
You don't know that.
Oh, no, I was thinking about Twilight Zone, the movie. Yeesh. Or The Crow. So one of the most heart-wrenching episodes of the series. The reason I started on this tangent is because Darren Morgan is the Fluke Man. And he was just an actor, and his brother was a producer on the series. And somehow... Darren managed to talk his brother into letting him write some episodes. And then it turned out that Morgan's vision of the X-Files understood the show more than Carter did. He understood it for what it was. It was more like Kolchak the Night Stalker in places than it is something so bleak and uninteresting like the remake of Kolchak the Night Stalker. So his episodes are always extremely meta, breaking the fourth wall, very funny, heart-wrenching, and usually have really interesting cameos in them. The first one that you should watch, one of his best, even though he's had some great ones, is Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose. One of the best episodes of the show, in my opinion. It's a brilliant example of Morgan's work, and still to this day rated one of the best of the entire series. It's smart, it's witty, it features an amazing, memorable performance by Peter Boyle, who died not too long after that. In it, we get a real sense of heart without being over melodramatic, and what would become the show's signature humor without being silly, which they do in the Chris Carter penned episode Postmodern Prometheus, where the deformed sort of mask Elephant Man type character loves Cher. Mm-hmm. It's all in black and white, which I thought was kind of silly. But when Darren Morgan does something like that, it's good. It just happens to be good. It's hard not to get misty over Morgan's complex sense of irony, his sincere storytelling that never feels like overly heavy-handed. His episodes give a real feeling of credibility to a series that could have been easily a one-trick pony. It could have been just Monster of the Week. And you know what? People wouldn't be talking about X-Files today if it didn't have standout things like this. So, to follow up, well, before we give you the last one, let me give you some things about Darren Morgan, just some of the other episodes he wrote. He wrote... the first episode he wrote was Humbug.
Again, one of my favorites.
Great episode. Fucking great episode. It was the 20th episode of the second season. What a great episode. It is Mulder and Scully investigating crimes among a collection of actual freaks, including the famous The Enigma, who does appear in it, who tattooed puzzle pieces all over his body. And it deals with the famous exhibit called the Fiji Mermaid, where they would just take, I don't know, like a monkey's corpse and then cut it in half and put a fish tail on it. Great episode, well conceived. There's a Quato in it. A lot of the sideshow performers in it are actual sideshow performers, including the guy that climbs out of the grave and then nails a railroad spike into his nostril. Real dude. That guy does that for real. And the Enigma is the Enigma. Oh, Dr. Blockhead, that was his name. It also features one of the most underrated of all geek genre actors, Michael J. Anderson, who you might know as the dancing dwarf from Twin Peaks. Mm-hmm. He plays Mr. Nutt in Humbug. If I remember right, he's the leader of the troupe, right?
I thought
he's like the...
No, I think he runs the hotel.
That's right, yeah, because it was weird that he was not in the troupe. He also wrote War of the Coporophages, which was the 12th episode of the third season. He really just leaned into the hilarity of the Monster of the Week thing, and he did a really meta thing about perception, POV, of urban legend, and the power of suggestion. In it, people are convinced that cockroaches have taken over this small town, and maybe they have some supernatural stuff behind them, whatever. But the entire commentary is that nothing actually happens in the episode. None of it was real. And it just shows you how hype and panic can influence what we consider to be reality. And then a weird Stephen Hawking character in it, which just seemed like hat on a hat, honestly. Though it does include... once again, off the dome, the great line when looking at these cockroaches, hung like a horsefly, which I still laugh at to this day. It's got a big dick for a... So, oh, man. And then, did he not write Home? I thought he wrote Home. Right, that one?
Glenn Morgan.
Oh, that's why I was thinking of it.
Mm-hmm.
Glenn Morgan, his brother, wrote Home, which is a terrifying, gross, amazing episode of the show, sort of a la Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that only was aired once on television because it was so controversial and gross. Also meta. I mean, it stars... I can't remember the actor's name, but he goes by Sheriff Andy. Because he has the literal same name as Andy Griffith from the Andy Griffith Show. It's actually pretty funny. Glenn Morgan, I guess because of the success of all this stuff, would go on with co-executive producer James Wong to create another Fox series, a science fiction show that would lead to the tone of Ronald Moore's Battlestar Galactica reboot, called Space Above and Beyond. I don't know if you ever watched that. It wasn't my Star Trek utopian vision, so I disliked it as a kid, but it is a good show. It's half Starship Troopers, half Battlestar Galactica. We'll get to the last episode here that I think is fundamentally important. Another Darren Morgan, Season 3, Episode 20, Jose Chung's From Outer Space, in quotation marks. My favorite episode. I think in the top 2 or 3 best episodes of the series, personally. I don't know, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd put it up there. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, so I need to refresh my memory on that one.
Oh, it holds up. They do the whole Woody Derenberger thing. They do the Men in Black thing. They go... The reason it's great is because it is the most meta ufology, conspiracy theory, narrative work that's ever been created. Because they do the Woody Derenberger story. They do the Men in Black stuff. They do the Inner Earth stuff. They do the whole suggestibility under hypnosis thing. They totally riff on Twin Peaks, finally. It stars the indomitable Charles Nelson Riley of Match Game fame. And I would like to add that one time at Comic-Con, I got to ask David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson a question. And my question was not about the X-Files per se, but what was it like working with a living legend like Charles Nelson Riley? They were both silent for an uncomfortably long period of time. And then David Duchovny goes, well, I liked his work on Match Game. And that was it. And I sat back down dejected. But I did get to see Gillian Anderson in person. Charles Nelson Riley plays an investigative novelist, sort of Capote-ish, who tries to get to the truth of two teenagers' account of alien abduction. It's a hilariously meta episode that unfolds its narrative through POV collections of both Mulder and Scully, which they will do again in a different episode, like the one that starred Luke Wilson, who's a vampire, allowing us to sort of see the the John Starks differences, the stark differences between... Wow, I'm going back in the 90s, huh? Allow us to see, he is a Knicks fan, allowing us to see the stark differences between the way they see the world around them. You know, Scully and Mulder. It plays directly on some of the most famous real-life paranormal events, though it did avoid tackling head-on the Mothman, but it does do Injured Cold in a light-hearted way without poking fun at them, though it is also poking fun at them. It's funny, it's quirky, and it features maybe one of the greatest cameos in the history of television by famous conspiracy nut Jesse the Body Ventura as an actual Man in Black, his partner being Alex Trebek.
That's pretty great.
Genius. To me, this is everything the X-Files could and should be. Not all the time, but if you really want to fulfill its premise, its promise, this is perfect. It is self-parody and self-aware without ruining the sincerity of the rest of the show. Sadly, this approach was so popular that they frequently tried to replicate it. Episodes like Hollywood AD, oh, I hate that episode. Even though I am willing to put money on that Tim Heidecker is in the episode Hollywood AD, along with, at that point, Téa Leoni, who is David Duchovny's wife. I guarantee you Tim Heidecker is in that and has a speaking part, but he is not credited. And I have looked all over the internet, and no one has ever called him out on it. But if you watch it, it's 100% Tim Heidecker as a zombie. Just watch it and trust me. They try to do stuff like that with, like I said, Hollywood AD and then Postmodern Prometheus, which was written by Chris Carter. And it basically got to the point where they realized those were the most successful, and so the show nearly jumped the shark there. Honorable mentions for this list would be Season 4, Episode 2, Home, which we talked about earlier. Fantastic episode. The main actress who plays the matriarch in that comes back in one of the only decent episodes of the reboot 2 seasons, playing 2 different characters, one a man and one a woman. Amazing, isn't it? We don't want to tell you how the show unfolds over the 9-year span it was on TV, and we don't want to tell you how disappointing the movies were, because they were horribly disappointing. But the series hit a sweet spot in the 90s where it was the it show. I mean, for everyone who didn't like Beverly Hills 90210, it was the it show. And they became huge cultural icons. Duchovny has not recovered since. Gillian Anderson has had a great career since. And it was so transformative, defining to at least my childhood, that my sexual awakening is Gillian Anderson, period. That's why I married a woman who looks exactly like her. Can't really argue with that. So, do yourself a favor. It's the 30th anniversary of the X-Files. Go back, look throughout, be patient to some of the doldrums. It really doesn't get bad until the end. Michael McKean has a really great cameo in it later on, switching bodies with Mulder. You'll notice some of the fun quirks, like Fox Mulder is a porn addict that they only address sort of like offhanded in a couple of episodes. It's totally worth a watch. This being the 30th anniversary, it's probably the appropriate time to binge watch that shit. So get on it. Ride that pony.
Yes, ride the pony.
Mm-hmm. Hey, look, I'm being genuine, okay? I'm giving genuine advice.
Yeah, get off the X and then watch X-Files instead.
Well, it's going to give it to you. X-Files will give it to you. That's our little rundown of the X-Files in their 30th anniversary year. Don't forget to pay your tabs. Don't forget to clean up after yourselves to some sort of reasonable degree. Don't forget to tip your wait staff and your bartenders. Don't forget to support your local comic shops and retailers. And from Dispatch Ajax Season 2, we would like to say, Godspeed, fair wizards.
I couldn't come up with anything. I don't know.
Please, go away.